Thank you for joining me today at Ventures Equipment. I'm Tyler. This is the Ventures Equipment VE4 self-leveling underlayment mixing pump. The purpose of this video is to go over the operations of this unit to involve setting the water, connecting the power, covering operations of the control panel, and cleaning up the unit. On the control panel here, you have a few adjustments. The first one being star wheel operations. You can either have it set in automatic or off, which would turn the star wheel off. If it's in automatic, the star wheel will turn on and off as material is needed in the mixing chamber. If it is in the off position, the star wheel will not turn. The next control we have here is the phase selector, which if you find that the input wiring is backwards, you can adjust the phase selector by depressing this button and turning the controls, and that will allow you to change the phases so the unit is running in the correct direction. The next control is the start-stop of the unit, which is used when you would like to start pumping or stop pumping. The next control is your main power,
off or on.
Next control is your water prime. This is utilized when setting the water on the flow meter. On this side of the unit, we have the discharge for the outlet of the mixing chamber and pump chamber. This is the rotor stator. These are the nuts to adjust the rotor stator when we use a pressure tester. We also have the drain for the mixing chamber and pump chamber. This is the water inlet for the mixing chamber and pump chamber. We have the flow tube, how we adjust our water per bag. We also have our input power, and then we have a remote plug. On this side of the unit, we have the water controls, starting here first with the water inlet and our water pump. Here we have a discharge that is boosted by the water pump. It can be used for a cleanup hose and or a port to clean out the hoses after done pumping, and it can also be used for priming the hoses. More commonly, a second hose is connected here and is used for cleanup. Here is our water pressure gauge, so we can monitor our water pressure. This unit does come standard with a water pressure switch. Should your water pressure fall below a set number, the unit will shut down, so that way you do not introduce dry material. Next, we have a pressure regulator, so the water stays constant into the mixing chamber. Next, we have a water solenoid, which turns the water on and off as the unit is operating. And then last in line here, we have the flow meter again. This unit is also equipped with low point drains. Should this unit be stored over a colder climate days, you have a low point drain here at the bottom of the water pump, the bottom of the pressure regulator, and right before the flow meter. We recommend that those be opened up when the unit is not in operation to avoid any damage. Now that we've gone over functions and controls of the unit, we're going to start the startup procedure. First thing you're going to want to do is take your input power. This is 220 volt 3-phase on a 30 amp circuit. Plug the unit in, and then we will also connect our water supply. Once the water supply is connected, we want to make sure we purge our water supply hose so that there is no interruption in the water system. Now that our water is connected and our water supply has been turned on, we will utilize one of the low point drains on the unit to make sure that we have all of the air purged out of our water hose. Seeing that we have no more air bubbles, we are ready to prime the system. The next operation is adjusting the water system to your desired flow rate. That is done by first removing the water tube from the mixing chamber, holding it off to the side. If you're in an environment where it has to be clean, this can be discharged into a bucket. Next, you will depress the water prime button on the control panel. You can see the float inside here is adjusting. That is where our flow rate is. By adjusting that, you can screw this in to decrease or screw it out to increase.
Gallons per minute.
After you have your water set to your desired level, you will release the water prime button You will then remove the drain cap out of the mixing chamber, reconnect the water tube to the mixing chamber, and you will then press the water prime button again until water is coming out of the drain port. Once water comes out, you can release the water prime button, reinstall the cap, and now the mixing chamber is ready for the next step. The next step before operation, we need to perform a pressure test on the rotor and stator to make sure that it is set at the desired level to achieve maximum efficiency. The way that is done is with our pressure tester in hand. It is installed on our discharge. Now that the pressure tester is connected to the outlet, what we will do next is turn the unit on. And once the unit is running, we will then shut this ball valve, see what our pump or what our gauge pressure shows, and we can then adjust, if needed, the rotor stator here. When adjusting the rotor stator, we want to make sure that it is done evenly across all 3 bolts. And we want to see the gauge, an average on the gauge being 300 psi. The next operation would be priming the hose. With this unit, we include a cam lock to garden hose adapter, so we can use our clean out port, threading that on to here, to our clean out port. We would then, for priming our hose, connect our hose here. Once the hose is connected, we would just open this valve to flow water down the hose. That is how we prime the hose. If there's any concern that there's blockages in the hose itself, we would use a clean out ball in the hose and push it through the hose to make sure there's no blockages. Once you have water coming out of the end of the hose, you would just shut this off, your water valve off here, remove the hose, and then you would want to walk the water out of the hose and then connect it to the rotor and stator. After the hose has been primed with water, the next step would be to make sure the water is walked out of the hose. After that is done, we would connect the hose to the discharge of the rotor and stator. Ideally, you would want both those ears to shut. It may require some mechanical help. After the hose is connected, we would then want to introduce our dry material into the dry chamber. Before doing that, we want to make sure that this is dry and clean. Once we've confirmed that it's dry and clean, we would then start breaking bags in here and turn the unit on. The next step after the hose is connected would be loading the dry material. With a bag in hand, you would place on top of the bag breaker, spin the bag, and dump it. And that's how you would load the dry chamber. Once pumping operations are complete, you would start the cleanup procedure. To do so, you would first turn off the star wheel on your control panel. By doing so, that will no longer introduce dry material into the mix chamber. And what we would recommend at that point is to clean the mix chamber by opening the motor, visually inspect the mix chamber, possibly remove the shaft and clean it inside. Make sure this is clean. Reinstall the shaft in the mix chamber. Close the mixing pumping motor. Before turning the unit back on, what we recommend is actually swinging this up out of the way and putting a used bag in between the wet chamber and the dry chamber. That is done by this. At this point, you can put a dry bag, a used bag in here just to protect the dry material. As long as no moisture is introduced in the dry chamber, the material can stay in here. Once your bag is in place, you would load the pump chamber back down. And with clean water, you would turn the unit on to push some of the material out of the hose, and then you would use foam balls to clean the hoses. We recommend running the foam balls at least 2 to 3 times or until you get clean water coming out of them. After the hoses are clean, they can be stored. But before the unit is put up completely, you do want to check the discharge port of the unit itself for buildup. If any buildup is inside there, you want to clean it before storage. Thank you for joining me today to go over the operations of the Ventures Equipment VE4. If you have any questions or are interested in purchasing, please give us a call in our office.